Since Islam is so prominent in our day, it must be a major end-time player as well. We'll look at Islam in prophecy next.
We've got sayings about the great Satan and the lesser Satan among the Iranians, and, they want to get rid of both. And there has even been some extremists among some of the leadership in Iran who in the past talk about how they can haste the coming of the 12th Imam by engaging in apocalyptic violence against the greater Satan and the lesser Satan. And that once that takes place, the emergence of the 12th Imam can happen, and there can be a global jihad that basically issues in a global government of Islam. And the thing of it is, we're witnessing before our very eyes developments that seem to be setting the stage for this Ezekiel invasion.
This is Understanding the Times Radio with Jan Markell. In this hour, you'll hear from Bill Randles, pastor of Believers in Grace Fellowship, a non-denominational family Bible church in Marion, Iowa. Jan and co-host Eric Barger are meeting with Pastor Randles to discuss the rise of Islam. Jan and Eric's guest has discovered some interesting passages on the religion he'll reveal to us. In our last segment, Jan will report on a recent broadcast we aired that created a lot of listener response. So let's begin. Here is Jan Markell.
And welcome to the program. I am so glad you could join me. And just by way of introduction, let me just say a few words here to set the stage for our first two segments here. Does Islam fit into Bible prophecy? Many suspect that it does, but have trouble connecting the dots, and we are going to try to do that for a couple of segments in this program. God said he would bless and even prosper the descendants of Ishmael. There are now 22 Arab nations, most of them quite wealthy from oil. Then you have other nations like Iran, which is not Arab, but Muslim, it's Persian. Does this affect those of us in the Western world? That is, all of this Islam-related type news and information. How does it affect us? The Bible also says in Genesis 16 that the Arab and Muslim world, their hand would be against every man's hand, that the Arab and Muslim world would even be against each other. And so we see Sunnis fighting Shiites today. And bringing the story up to very modern times, we're going to begin our discussion with, I think, something that was certainly a game-changing event. Obviously, 9/11 was a huge game-changing event. Another event that followed that a few years later, we're going to get to that early in my discussion, and that would be concerning Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, and something that he did back in 2009, which reshaped the planet almost, and certainly the Arab-Islamic situation, the Arab Spring, and some related things. So to discuss this, I have Eric Barger in studio with me, and I have on the line from Iowa, Pastor Bill Randles. And Eric, you and I have both taken a very close look at Pastor Bill Randles' book, A Sword on the Land, The Muslim World in Prophecy. You in agreement with it?
Yes, I am. And I think it's really important for the church to get to understand this topic, because there are so many side roads to it that if you don't understand it, you're going to miss other things.
Well, I would agree. Pastor Bill Randles, welcome to the program, by the way.
Hey, I'm really honored. Thank you so much.
How did you get a burden for this topic?
Well, as a lifelong student of Bible prophecy, an observation occurred to me one day in studying Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Hosea, the Old Testament Hebrew prophets' accounts of the last days, that every single nation that they say would be besieging Israel and that the Lord himself would go to war with in the last days happened to have this in common. It's Islamic. And so that really, really piqued my interest. And then, like you say, I believe that what happened when Barack Obama addressed the entire Islamic world in 2009, June 2009, that's an unprecedented thing for an American president. Never anything like that. And I knew that was a very signal event of much and great significance. I went on YouTube immediately and gave kind of a brief commentary back then called Out of Africa.
Let's go back to June 2009. He coerced Egypt to virtually legitimize the Muslim Brotherhood terror group. Now, let's paint the picture here, because in June 2009, the Muslim Brotherhood were honored guests at the speech that Barack Obama made in Cairo, Egypt, and Hosni Mubarak was not even invited to this speech.
Exactly.
And out of this speech actually came the Arab Spring about a year later, year and a half later perhaps, the destabilization of the entire Mideast, and now Islam is exalted in our White House and State Department. Eric, what did you see when you heard this speech?
It's just uncanny that, as you've already pointed out, that the president would say these things, would stand up. But in making a statement that America, well, he made statements along the way that America was a great Islamic nation and those kind of things. This was a complete promotion and a meddling in world affairs and the affairs of another country. Really, it led to the bringing down of Mubarak.
Yes, it did. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, exactly right. And another thing, too, is that it's very significant where it took place. Cairo, Egypt, at Al-Azhar University. And to the Sunni Muslim world, which is 80% of all Muslims, that is the Harvard, Yale, and Cambridge of what I call worldwide jihad, because they give the philosophical and theological underpinnings that justify jihad. And nobody knew the group, the Muslim Brotherhood, like Egypt, and they banned them because they're a terror group. But one of the conditions Obama made in honoring Egypt the way that he did by giving a speech from Cairo was that they be legitimized. And you're right, Jan. Hundreds and even thousands of people have died since then. Great disruption has come to pass.
Here's just a short clip of Barack Obama back June 2009, and the speech was called A New Beginning.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world, one based on mutual interest and mutual respect, and one based upon the truth that America and Islam are not exclusive and need not be in competition. Instead, they overlap and share common principles of justice and progress, tolerance, and the dignity of all human beings. I do so recognizing that change cannot happen overnight. I know there's been a lot of publicity about this speech, but no single speech can eradicate years of mistrust, nor can I answer in the time that I have this afternoon all the complex questions that brought us to this point. But I am convinced that in order to move forward, we must say openly to each other the things we hold in our hearts, and that too often are said only behind closed doors. There must be a sustained effort to listen to each other, to learn from each other, to respect one another, and to seek common ground. As the Holy Quran tells us, be conscious of God and speak always the truth.
And the greatest victims, I think, of this speech, obviously the Muslim world destabilized, but the greatest victims, well, there were Muslims, of course, victims, but Christians. Christians have been slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands since that speech, and nobody seems to care.
Exactly right. Christian communities that have endured dimitude throughout the Middle East since the time of Christ are currently being wiped out as a result of subsequent events to that. I think of the Chaldeans in Iraq. At one time numbered 2 million, and now there's less than 200,000 remaining there as an outcome of the Arab Spring, which was an outcome of this speech. Another thing I want to point out that I think is kind of important, Jan and Eric, is that he doesn't really quote the Quran all that much, but one of the quotes that will come in the speech that is prominent, and he concludes the speech with, is what the Muslims call the Isra. That is a designation for the verse that tells us that Muhammad got on a white-winged horse, interestingly named Buraq, and went to Al-Aqsa, or the farthest places, and ascended to heaven and had a prayer meeting with Jesus and Moses and the prophets. And that's the verse that culminated this speech. And the interesting thing to me about it is that Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran once by name, and yet the Muslims claim that it's their third holiest place. And the reason they claim that is because Islamic scholars are saying Al-Aqsa is Jerusalem, the farthest place. So if you wrap your mind around that, the leader of the free world, in one of the few Quranic recitations he made during this speech to all of the Muslim world, cited the one verse that gives the Muslims a dubious claim as their third holiest site of the city of Jerusalem.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell, and I'm talking this couple of segments here about Islam in prophecy, the Muslim world in Bible prophecy, and I'm basing some of the discussion with Pastor Bill Randles from Believers in Grace, and that's in Marion, Iowa, on his book, A Sword on the Land. You can find it at believersingrace.com. And I think, Bill, you have an e-version somewhere?
It's on Amazon. It's a Kindle version.
Kindle version on Amazon, A sword on the land. If you're interested in how did the Islamic world actually play, I mean, it came along thanks to Ishmael, and then from there it really has played a very, very prominent role. Let's jump up, gentlemen, to 1979. I guess really that's going backwards to 1979. And Iran back then was a stable pro-West country. It was going to be destabilized. It had the Shah of Iran back then. He was pro-American, pro-West. He certainly wasn't perfect. But Bill, talk to us about who came along to replace the Shah of Iran.
Yes, this is one of the great horror stories of the modern world, and it's due to what I would call the pathological altruism of the left. In this case, Jimmy Carter pulled the rug out from underneath one of America's best friends in the region, the Shah of Iran of the Peacock Dynasty, and he was replaced by an arch-fundamentalist Shiite mullah, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who had been languishing in Paris, hiding out in France, and producing millions of cassette tapes and distributing them through the Shiite world, fomenting this rebellion, which ultimately took place, the first modern nation that was supplanted by Sharia law is Iran, or Persia in the Bible. So I call the chapter of my book Iran's Demon Possession, and I refer to the verse Jesus gave where if a house is empty, swept, and clean, then 7 worse spirits will come into it. And I believe that's what's happened in the 1979. You see old pictures of Iran, not really all that old, in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. Modern people in Western dress, liberated women, Western haircuts, commerce, all the trappings that you see in the rest of the developed world. All that wiped out as of 1979. Lots of blood and torture shed, and women confined to these dark cowls of death, basically. This is a modern phenomenon that now is being repeated in many other nations, in the Middle East especially.
Following this, and this was, of course, some years later, a few decades later, the Iranian nuclear agreement, really not a treaty, I don't think it was ever signed, and I think we need to consider, just some elements of this Iranian treaty came into existence 2014, 15, 16, as well as $150 billion. And strange role played again the Obama administration and his chief advisor, who is Iranian-born, Valerie Jarrett. And now, again, Iran is going to be destabilizing the entire world. She's not an Arab nation. She's a Persian, but a Muslim nation.
It is a Muslim nation.
Yeah.
And it is a manifestation of a divide that runs through the Islamic world, and that is the Sunni-Shiite shift. 80% of Muslims are Sunni, but Iran is Shiite, and it's the center of the Shiites, and they have just shifted into the power position of the Muslim world with this breathtakingly naive, if that, maybe it's something even more sinister, this deal. You have a nation who is the world's leading exporter of terror, who is unrepentant, who has shed American blood with impunity. And you have a president of the United States just moving heaven and earth to get them up into modern nuclear technology and $150 billion, which we're reading about now that they're retrofitting all of their military capacity with this. We know from the Bible where this ends, and that's pointing to Ezekiel 38.
Yes, it's pointing to Ezekiel 38, Gog and Magog, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But first I want to reference the Islamic Mahdi, because there's an Islamic Messiah, and Eric, you talk about this quite often, the Islamic eschatology. It's theology similar to end-time theology that Christians have, that a man is going to come along, a man with a plan, except they call him the Mahdi.
Well, I could probably go on for a while about how all the things we just talked about were so scripted. What Carter did, what was said in the speech in Cairo, all of these things were scripted. And all of them, once we look at prophecy, once prophecy has been fulfilled and it's all over, all the prophecy's been done, I believe that these things could show up in a list where we'd list the things that were important to fulfilling prophecy, because they've really helped to make things happen. When you look at Islamic eschatology, it's just one more proof that Islam and Christianity and Judaism are not theological brothers, are not compatible, because Islam believes that the 12th Mahdi is coming, and of course the Iranians they're fanatic of it.
Yes, they are.
In fact, there's talk that they've been actually in communication with the Mahdi, whether that's spiritual or physical, I don't know. But, you think about it, the 12th Mahdi is coming, and they believe that Jesus will be the enforcer for Allah that will force the Jews and Christians to renounce and to become Islamic in the end. I mean, it's, there's a Jesus in the Quran, but he's not the Jesus of the Bible. There's prophecy all through the Quran, but it's not compatible in any way with the prophecies of the Scripture, and it's very, very radical.
Let me just play a quick soundbite here. This is Joel Rosenberg, and he's talking about the 12th Imam. Now, this is a few years ago because Ahmadinejad is the president as Joel is speaking, and that's really irrelevant because he's talking about the Imam who is to come, the 12th Imam. He paints an excellent picture here in just a couple of minutes.
Joel, this is a fascinating read. Why the 12th Imam and why now?
Because it affects Iranian foreign policy right now. In other words, the leaders of Iran believe this is happening. They believe that this Islamic Messiah is coming, this 12th Imam, at the end of days, in the end of time, and that once he comes, either Israel and the United States, Judeo-Christian society as we've known it, will have already been destroyed, or that all the conditions for their destruction will be there, and then the Messiah will come and finish off the infidels and set up an Islamic one-world government. The two key people are Iranian President Ahmadinejad and the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Khamenei. In fact, Khamenei said this summer that he had visited with the 12th Imam. He said this in July. Now, nobody's quite sure what he means by this, but Ahmadinejad has also said over the last 4 or 5 years that he has had meetings with the 12th Imam. Who are they meeting with? A person, a spirit, a combination? I mean, or are they just making this up? If our intelligence agency was tracking that and explaining to our political leaders, listen, this is how Iran's leaders are making decisions, it would lead you to a conclusion that it's led me to, which is how exactly would you negotiate with or contain or deter people who believe it's their God-given mission in life to destroy Judeo-Christian civilization using nuclear weapons in order to bring about their Messiah? But in the end, as a follower of Jesus Christ, I would say, like many Christians watching this program would say, we don't have a lot of influence in Washington. And so the question is, what do we do? And my answer is, we want to make sure that everyone in the Middle East has heard the gospel of Jesus Christ, from Tehran to Tel Aviv and everywhere in between. Why? Because a war is coming. I can't tell you, Gary, whether it's this year, whether it's next year, whether it's next summer, 2 years from now, a major war between Iran and Israel is coming, and people are going to die. People are going to suffer. And the question is whether they will have heard the good news that God loves them and wants to adopt them into his family through faith in Jesus Christ or not. And it's critical that we reach that region with the gospel now because we know the truth. Given that Ezekiel 36 and 37 have already come true, the rebirth of Israel, Jews coming back to the Holy Land, rebuilding the ancient ruins, making the desert bloom, this has happened. Those end times prophecies have happened, which means that if Ezekiel 36 and 37 have already come to pass, isn't it remotely possible that Ezekiel 38 and 39 could come to pass in our lifetime? I think that answer is yes, it could. Not to say that it will, but events are moving in that way.
So is this Gog and Magog prophecy, is this just a warning from God or is it imminent?
It's inevitable. The scriptures say this day is coming. A lot of complications, a lot of cross currents, one theme. The region is growing unified against Israel.
We'll continue our discussion in my next segment, talking to Pastor Bill Randles with Eric Barger in studio, The Muslim World in Bible Prophecy. More when we get back. Don't go away.
We know you enjoyed our first segment of today's broadcast. There is much more to come. Don't forget, you can order an audio recording of today's program or any program you hear on Understanding the Times Radio when you phone 763-559-4444. We take listener feedback very seriously. We're so thankful when you write with your comments. How are we doing? We value your opinion. Send us your comments or questions. Write to us at olivetreeviews.org or address your mail to Olive Tree Ministries, Post Office Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. In just a moment, Jan and Eric will return with Pastor Bill Randles. We are finalizing our 21st Understanding the Times Conference for October 7 at Grace Church in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. just outside of Minneapolis. Please consider joining us from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There is no cost or registration needed, but you need to make hotel reservations early. Meet believers from across America who take our time seriously but have a hope and expectancy many do not have. Our speakers include Amir Sarfati.
Thessalonians chapter 4, he says, the dead in Christ will rise first, and then we that are alive will be caught up in the air. In other words, he was completely sure it's going to happen in his lifetime. And that's the way we should live, as if it is going to happen at any given minute.
Dr. Mark Hitchcock.
And to me, that's a great picture of Bible prophecy for us. Knowing what's coming gives you peace of mind. And the Bible tells us that prophecy has a calming influence on our lives.
Pastor J.D. Farag.
That's not to be dismissive of the seriousness of what's happening in the world today, but thankfully we have prophecy in the Bible that tells us not only what's going to happen at the time of the end, but why it's going to happen and where it's going to lead. And by the way, spoiler alert, we win.
Michelle Bachman.
These people don't give up. That's what we don't understand. That is everything for them, is their strategy to get to one world government. And they will do anything, including lawless actions, to get there.
Visit our website for details, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. Or call us at 763-559-4444. That's 763-559-4444. Helping you stay informed on issues that could change your life.
This is Jan Markell, keeping you informed on the issues of the day through the lens of the Bible. This is our mission as a ministry. We provide straightforward conversation with the best commentators on biblical truth every week right here on this station.
The religion of Islam, which started in the 6th century A.D., Islam means submission. And an interesting thing about the religion of Islam is that though it is 6 centuries after Christ, it is not necessarily specifically predicted in the Bible, but the way I put it is it's very specifically anticipated in the Bible. And I think this is a very important point to understand.
The role of Islam in Bible prophecy. That's our first topic on today's Understanding the Times. Here with Marion, Iowa, Pastor Bill Randles. Once again, Jan Markell.
And welcome back. And just a quick note to my Twin Cities audience, those of you across the country, thank you for bearing with me when I do this now and then, my Twin Cities audience. I will be doing a summer class on Bible prophecy, Sunday evenings, 6:30 p.m. I'm going to be renting the facilities of Kehillat Sar Shalom Messianic Congregation, St. Louis Park, on Rhode Island Avenue. That's the former Twin City Fellowship Church, There's no cost. Sunday evenings, June, July, August, 6:30 to 8 p.m. Again, consider joining us every Sunday evening except July 4th weekend at the former Twin City Fellowship. It is currently Kehillat Sar Shalom Messianic Congregation. Okay, we're spending some time this hour talking about a sword on the land, the Muslim world in Bible prophecy, because Islam, quite frankly, Judaism and Islam are two huge players when it comes to the issues of the last days. Pastor Bill Randles, Believers in Grace. Find more information, believersingrace.com, including the book, A Sword on the Land, The Muslim World in Bible Prophecy. Bill Randles, I'm going to jump quickly to Isaiah 17, and many think we're going to wake up any day and learn that Damascus perhaps has been obliterated, which is prophesied in Isaiah 17:1. We don't know when that will happen. Your thoughts on this?
First of all, I want to make very clear that has never happened before in history, according to the way the Bible says it will happen, which tells us Damascus shall no longer be a city. anymore. It will become a heap of ruins. That has never happened. In fact, ironically, Damascus's claim to fame is that it's the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. And yet the prophet Isaiah saw the day, the burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it'll be a ruinous heap. In fact, the next verse says, the cities of Aroer are forsaken. They'll be for flocks. There was a Russian drone film going over the cities around Damascus that showed block after block after block after block of ruined World War II era style bombed out buildings and no sign of life anywhere. It is staggering what's happened in Syria. You had a nation of 22 million people, of which only 11 million remain in its boundaries. They are flowing out of this. This is apocalyptic stuff that we're seeing. And yes, I do believe that we're very close to the day where the final fulfillment of Isaiah 17, which would be the utter obliteration of Damascus. I say this with sorrow, too. Yeah. This, too, is a reflection of the Sunni, Shia, and the American-Russian proxy wars that are being used up to this point, that Russia has an interest with Persia and with Turkey now lately and Syria. And the United States has taken its side with the Sunnis, and we actually created these militias to take out the son of Bashar Assad, who is Alawite. He's not even Sunni or Shiite. He's a minority sect Alawite, although they are a sect of Shiism.
Right. Bill, Israel, the text says Israel is going to have to do this strike, and of course she already has. She's had some limited strikes on Damascus here in the last year or two. She took out a nuclear reactor in the Syrian desert in 2007. It was not a highly populated area. But Bill and Eric, when Israel does this terrible thing that's going to happen, according to Bible prophecy, I have to strike probably because of Syria's chemical weapons that are buried. Zechariah 12 is going to explode. The world is going to turn on Israel for doing the world a favor.
Exactly. Very similar to what happened with Saddam Hussein. Israel took out a nuclear reactor, saved the world, and received condemnation.
If we want to know where all Hussein's weapons of mass destruction went, we're going to find out, because there's good, I think, educated speculation that they are hidden, buried, etc. around Damascus. And, when this happens, this is going to capture the world's attention, probably like nothing we've seen in a very long time. Maybe since 9/11, there's never been anything quite like this when this takes place. And if the leader of Syria had done a knee-jerk reaction when President Trump sent the Tomahawk missiles not long ago, we could have already seen this happen. When this thing blows up, it will be not only fulfillment of prophecy, and one we can point to that's so direct and so obvious in Isaiah 17. I hope folks will go and read that and get that set in their hearts and minds so they can converse about it. But it's going to be awful, and at the same time, it's going to help the world turn against Israel. Another prophetic event.
Another prophetic event, exactly.
It'll be a watershed. And can I share something, too? You've got two prophecies that are saying the same thing about Damascus, Zechariah 9 and Isaiah 17. Right. And in both the prophecies, in the context of the destruction of Damascus, you have a verse that says, "At that day shall a man look to his Maker. His eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. He will not look to the altars, the work of his hands." In other words, this is something that's going to happen. It'll be such a watershed event. It will get the whole world's attention.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. I have on the line from Marion, Iowa, Pastor Bill Randles. We're talking about his book, A Sword on the Land, The Muslim World in Bible Prophecy. Learn more at believersingrace.com. We're not carrying the book, so be best if you not call here, but there is an e-version on Amazon.com as well. Gentlemen, because Islam is playing such a prominent role today, very popular teaching now is that the Antichrist will be a Muslim. I don't think any of us buy into that, but there are some good teachers out there who do believe that, who are kind of spreading that, and it's kind of catching on, shall we say. I think, and I'm going to speak for myself, I think we all believe that the Antichrist is going to be a Western European leader, perhaps. Would I be right, Bill and Eric?
I believe that. I really do. I see why people say that he would be a Muslim, but I do believe he'll come from what we'd call call Christendom.
I agree, Jan. I've never bought the idea of the Islamic Antichrist. I am friends with and have good fellowship with those who disagree. This is not a stickling point or a breaking point, but I think the Antichrist is coming out of the revived Roman Empire.
Bill Randles, you made an interesting point with me privately the other day. You made the suggestion that a European leader could come along who could calm the continent, which right now is completely in turmoil because of Islamic immigrants, and that Europe would for sure see this man with a sort of a answer to the staggering problems that the immigration issue has caused in Europe. They could even, let's use the word, anoint him, this leader,
they would worship him.
Because he has solved the problem that whole continent is going through, because European socialist leaders have decided to get rid of borders and welcome anybody who wants to come across the borders, and now there's a literal invasion. So what if a man with a plan has the answer?
See, this is what I've been thinking for a long time, and I do believe that not only do they want to get rid of borders, they want to get rid of Judeo-Christian civilization.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And there's a pushback coming. That's why you see people like Geert Wilders and Marine Le Pen giving a serious threat to the powers that be. I've always believed that some Western European prince is going to rise up and really deal a stern blow to the Muslims and put them in their place, because it's so out of control there. And when they do, I believe people will worship that person who is like the beast, who can make war with him.
For sure that if a leader can do that, he'll be recognized by a lot of the populace. And you know what? I mean, Islam is never going to assimilate. It doesn't want to do that. What it wants is domination. The Quran is calling for that. So those who have come out of other countries, whether they fled war or just economic depression, whatever the case, as refugees, they're not there to do anything except create a Muslim state. When you hear things like the leader of Austria make statements that maybe women should all have head coverings, every woman should, it isn't long before then, well, they can't leave home without a male subject with them, and they do the things that Sharia law states. I mean, that's what's coming. And simply, there are going to be people in those European nations that are not going to go along with this. And as it continues to rise, something has to stop it. And we don't know who that's going to be, but it's going to be someone who leads a movement to stop it.
One other thing I want to say is that within Western European culture, there's two souls. There's one, the leftist nihilists that don't believe in anything anymore. Mm-hmm. But you take someone like Viktor Orban in Hungary, who's put up a wall and has made a public announcement, we don't want Muslim refugees because we're a traditionally Christian country, we want to keep our Christian heritage. Or you look at Geert Wilders, you look at Marine Le Pen, you look at people in Britain like Paul Weston. I mean, there is two souls. There is coming an emerging pushback, I believe, and possible that out of that could come the prince that shall come.
Okay, what I'd like to do is I'd like to play a quick soundbite here of Joel Rosenberg again, because he's so articulate on the topic we're discussing. And what we're talking about for these segments, folks, is the Muslim world in Bible prophecy. They are a major player in these end-time events, which is why the birth of the theology that the Antichrist could be a Muslim, which I personally reject, because the Jews would never, ever, ever honor a Muslim or even a former Muslim. Joel Rosenberg here, it's just a minute and almost 2 minutes, commenting on ISIS in Bible prophecy.
Do you see ISIS or these Islamic groups in general, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, others, playing a role in Bible prophecy?
I do, and for several reasons. First, of course, Jesus warned that wars, rumors of wars, revolutions, these would be happening and intensifying in the last days before we get to his return. Matthew 24 and Luke 21. We see the persecution of Christians in Matthew 24. It's going to intensify, and Christians are under siege. I mean, but then you also have an interesting prophecy in John chapter 16, verse 2. It's often overlooked as a prophecy. Jesus said, an hour is coming when those who kill you will believe they're doing this in service to God. Now, that was true in the first century. Jewish leaders who hated the followers of Jesus persecuted, and so did the Romans. But I believe the hour has come now where we're seeing people who think they're doing it for God. Unfortunately, they're doing it to Satan. They're sacrificing Christians as blood sacrifices to their God. The other part is that we see the rise spies of all these countries surrounding Israel are going to try to attack and consume and savage Israel in the last days. And so a lot of judgments fall on the countries surrounding because their hearts are so wicked. Now, that's not true of every person in every country in that region yet, but if ISIS ends up, or a group like them, takes over control of that whole region as they want, this would be consistent with Bible prophecy.
Okay, we heard Joel Rosenberg say earlier in the program, if Ezekiel 36 and 37 has been fulfilled, why not Ezekiel 38 and 39? Bill Randles, you write about this. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a succession in Ezekiel. And by the way, I'd like to add, Ezekiel 35 is as good as a description of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all their ilk as I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So you can got Ezekiel 35, 36, 37. And obviously we're seeing with our very eyes right now in the transformation of Turkey, in the alliance of Russia with Persia, in the North African transformation, they took out Gaddafi. We are seeing the Ezekiel 38 and 39 coalition coming together. I mean, it's to those who have eyes to see, it's as plain as day. The prophecies are being fulfilled before our very eyes. It's incredible.
Exactly. And if he fulfilled those prophecies and so many more, he's not going to change now. God is consistent here. And that's the point I've made over and over. What's to make us think we're somehow special, that he won't fulfill the other things in our day? So it's definitely coming. And may I say, I love Joel Rosenberg. And these are people who have stood by the truth that prophecy is being fulfilled and will be fulfilled right to the very end to have God's purpose come to pass.
Let's consider the other participants in this Gog-Magog war, because what we're talking about for these segments has been the Muslim world in Bible prophecy. Iran is a major player, or Persia, but we've got Turkey, we've got Libya, we've got Sudan, we've got for sure the Islamic republics of Russia and possibly Russia herself coming down. Vladimir Putin, we don't know. Your thoughts on that, Bill Randles?
One I'd like to highlight is Turkey. Right before our eyes, we're living in unreal days because apocalyptic things are happening before our eyes. But a lot of people don't have a sense of history. We're at the 100th anniversary of a transformation of Turkey.
That's right.
From an Ottoman Empire, Muslim-dominated society, and Ataturk came in after World War I and transformed that place in a miraculous fashion. He put Islam on the sidelines. He didn't outright ban it, but he made Turkey a secular country, even going so far as to closing down schools, outlawing the Chador, and even changing the language. Okay, and what you're seeing with your eyes in the last 2 or 3 years with Erdogan is a complete reversal of that secularization, and Turkey's going back. In fact, Erdogan recently gave a speech in which he said, 100 years ago, Europe called us the sick old man of Europe, and he said, now look at you, Europe, you're the sick old man, and we are going to make you pay for what you've done to Turkey. Turkey is transforming from a modern, secular, progressive Muslim nation that was an example. This is one of the most significant Muslim nations in fulfillment of prophecy that we have. When you see Togarmah, the sons of Togarmah, the house of Togarmah, Gomer, and even Magog, that's Turkey. Those are regions of Turkey.
Yes, and the context of Ezekiel 38:39 says this is going to happen in the last days. It says that they're going to come to seize a spoil. They're going to seize some wealth. I personally think that the wealth is going to be the natural gas that has been discovered off of Israel's coast. Gentlemen, this is going to take place in the early stages of the tribulation. We don't know this, but they're going to be dealing with the burning of weapons, I think, for 7 years. I think this is probably a tribulation experience. Eric, your thoughts on this?
I agree with you, Jan, completely. And as they come against Israel, you know, there is the speculation of the Psalm 83 war that others have seen,
right,
and that our friend Bill Salas has written about. We really don't know. We're seeing through a glass darkly, but we do know that these events are going to come to pass. However they take place, we're not sure.
You know where it all ends is a siege around Jerusalem.
Yes.
Okay, and this is another one of these passages I've been telling people all over the world. Zechariah chapter 12. Behold, I'll make Jerusalem a cup of trembling to all the nations round about. And what we're seeing in the world today is fulfilling that prophecy. In fact, the United Nations, startlingly, as recently through UNESCO, United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Organization, basically disqualified Jerusalem and the holy sites of the Jews to having any connection with the Jewish people. They've assigned find them as Muslim shrines. These prophecies they're happening. What's ironic too, Jan and Eric, is that when I first was saved, everyone was looking at these prophecies and believing that Jesus is coming. But now it seems like people are asleep. So I hope that this book can help wake some people up.
Well, again, folks, you can find the e-version of A Sword on the Land, The Muslim World in Bible Prophecy on Amazon. You can get the hard copy at believersingrace.com, believersingrace.com. The author I've had on air with me now here for 40 minutes, Pastor Bill Randles. Eric Barger's been in studio with me to discuss it. We're going to change topics in my closing segment. Bill Randles, I want to thank you for what you do and for sounding the alarm, that the Muslim world, indeed, I mean, it plays a huge role in the closing days of history.
But thank you so much, Jan, and thank you, Eric. I really appreciate you letting me be on today.
All right, we'll talk again.
All right,
thank you.
Our last segment on today's Understanding the Times features a commentary by Jan Markell. A published article on the difficulty of finding a new pastor was the subject of one of our recent broadcasts. We received a lot of listener response to that program. Coming up, Jan will be sharing some of those insightful responses.
2 weeks ago, my radio co-hosts and I took a look at the issues surrounding finding a new church, having to leave a church that you've been in for years, even decades, and what to look for, what questions to ask, what are the make or break issues in selecting or leaving a church.
But first, one more gentle reminder. We are a listener underwritten broadcast ministry. The only way we can remain on the air is through your generous financial gifts. During the summer months, we usually find our support dropping somewhat. We need more listeners to help sustain us through June, July, and August. Please consider becoming a part of our growing support family. Many see this ministry as a critical resource contributing to their spiritual awareness. If that describes you, we invite you to mail your tax-deductible gifts to Olive Tree Ministries, Post Office Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota, 55311. You can also give by phone at 763-559-4444 or securely online at olivetreeviews.org. Please stay with us. Some of your responses to a recent broadcast up next when Jan Markell returns.
I have often called Understanding the Times radio for the remnant. Around the world, people have had enough of fake news, slanted news, and evidence that good people are marginalized and unappreciated. That is why this program focuses on the truth and the ultimate good news. If you would like to keep it coming to your neighborhood, please consider a tax-deductible gift to Olive Tree Ministries. Give online at olivetreeviews.org, olivetreeviews.org. You can call us business hours, Central Time, 763-559-4444, 763-559-4444, or just drop us a note. If you can't financially support, let us know. We make a difference in your life. Write to Olive Tree Ministries, Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311, Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. Help us look at today, but with another eye on tomorrow and the ultimate hope that awaits us. Folks, this ministry has written a little end time study guide. Are we living in the last days? For your neighborhood group in your church interested in these topics, you can cover it in 12 weeks. It's got built-in questions in the study guide. Check it out in my store, olivetreeviews.org. It's in all of my newsletters, print and e-newsletters, or give my office a call. It's $9 for one copy. You can get 10 copies for $60. And those who have an interest in this topic, you can just have a 12-week study, and it's not detailed, it's not complicated.
Now, let's wrap up today's discussion on Understanding the Times. As promised, here with a commentary, Jan Markell.
And I'm going to close off this program with just a short commentary about actually changing topics. Let me first say, I hope you'll look into both my print and e-newsletter, and you can get a CD of any program. Why don't you call us when you can about CD subscription, get a CD of every program we do here on Understanding the Times Radio. 2 weeks ago, my radio co-hosts and I took a look at the issues surrounding finding a new church, having to leave a church that you've been in for years, even decades, and what to look for, what questions to ask, what are the make or break issues in selecting or leaving a church. And I had tremendous response. I heard from folks as far away as Sweden and New Zealand, and the difficulty finding a church, well, it's global. Let me put it that way. I heard from a handful of people who were in the perfect church, just very, very few. But at least there was that kind of report that some churches are in fact teaching the full counsel of God, including eschatology or end times. Now, here's what people told me they had to flee from. They left because the gospel was watered down. Others said their church was moving from gospel preaching to social justice. Others said that there was the entrance of mysticism, contemplative prayer, centering prayer, breath prayers, lectio divina, Christian yoga. Many had to leave because of the New Apostolic Reformation. I'll say more about that in a minute. Kingdom Now theology, the church will make the world perfect. They couldn't take that. Some who left because their church had blatant hostility to eschatology or Bible prophecy. There was a mocking of those who wanted to stand for truth, including biblical truth, and therefore they had to leave. Some churches were not condemning abortion. Others, I was told, were way too soft on gay marriage. The new mood in their church was, who are we to judge? I heard from Pentecostal people who were heartsick that their Pentecostal church was taking things too far and began promoting practices and teachers who were very off base, and particularly promoting Bill Johnson's Bethel Church in Redding, California. I also heard from angry people. Why was I picking on Bethel Church in Redding, California? Don't you know people are being healed there, I was told. And I was supposed to be honoring this outfit and not warning about it. And I'm going to say more about that in just a moment and even play a sound bite. That's just a quick sampling of dozens of emails I got. Let me just read one here, then I'm going to move on to the issue of Bethel in Redding, California. And this comes from a gal. She says, I'm writing to you about a very sad situation. She says, I have belonged to a church for 35 years, and it has been a beacon of light to our valley. It's the largest church in the town of 60,000. We got a new pastor from California. He's young and has little experience. Unfortunately, he brought in fragments of Kingdom Now theology, and she says, thank you for devoting a whole program on that back in January with Ron Rhodes. It has really opened my eyes. And she says, as a single woman who has been fully involved in this church and considered it my family, I have had to leave. In the last year, I have experienced some of the deepest grief I have ever known. Others are leaving the church as well for multiple reasons, most of them having been there for 30 years. The young people are flocking. On the other hand, I sent a letter to all 12 board members and the pastor telling them that I had to leave and why. She says, I was a missionary for 10 years, sent out by this church. I served in most areas of leadership. I am well known. I prayed that my letter to the board would be a wake-up call to them. One of the board members started asking questions and told the pastor that he wanted to discuss this theology with the board, but the pastor said no. I tell you this to thank you for being a watchman on the wall, and your ministry has greatly educated me. That was one response. And another one, this one, I loved your response as to one reason you could not attend a church, replacement theology. He says, I have been accused of overreacting for even caring about this subject. People don't realize that tells one a lot as to how they will stand on other subjects. This is a note I got from Sweden, and she says, the program I heard on Christian radio today about the church was so important to me. A person even here in Sweden trying to recruit me to her circle, and her favorite church is Bethel in Redding, California. What I see seems to be demonic, at least to my ears. thank you, and I needed to get a tape for her from your program. Well, let's just stop. I've got another email or two I want to read, but let's just stop here and can consider the topic of Bethel Church in Redding, California. And I want to play just a short soundbite, and it's of Andrew Strom. And he has done some extensive research on this type of church phenomenon, because it's not just Bethel. That just happens to be a prominent one. There are many, many more doing the same kind of activity.
Hi, I'm Andrew Strom, author of the new 2015 edition of Kundalini Warning, False Spirits Invading the Church. And the main reason we've put out this new version of the book is because of Bill Johnson and Bethel Church in Redding, California. For years, Bill's wife, Benny Johnson, has been the senior co-pastor of Bethel alongside her husband. And this woman is into some truly weird New Agey stuff, reflexology, and much more. Benny Johnson herself put out this picture. She's lying, soaking on C.S. Lewis's grave. These are students from Bethel's School of Ministry, and they've been photographed around the world lying on the graves of dead Christian leaders. There's a teaching in some of these circles that you can soak up the anointing by lying on their graves. Here's Bill Johnson himself at the grave of the wife of Smith Wigglesworth, the famous healing evangelist. In 2012, the Bethel crowd put out this book, The Physics of Heaven, and the subtitle says it all: Exploring God's Mysteries of Sound, Light, Energy, Vibrations, and Quantum Physics. Many Christian leaders, when they've read this book, say it is one of the most New Age things they've ever seen. The contents are unbelievable. Just the chapter headings alone are proof enough. Vibrating in harmony with God, the God vibration, dolphin therapy, quantum mysticism, human body frequencies. What on earth is a major ministry like Bethel doing, promoting such a weird and mystical work?
Okay, grave soaking. Now, that's one of the reasons we bring up the topic of Bethel Church, Redding, California, in a negative way. In other words, you lay on the grave of a dead saint. C.S. Lewis, that's one of the graves that are cited here. Lay on that particular grave, and the spirit of that dead person is to come into the body of whoever is laying upon the grave. Now, folks, if this isn't dangerous, I don't know what is. And yet this is one of the primary teachings that's going on in Bethel Church in Redding, California. It is not sound. Again, I had an email all the way from Sweden, and folks in her circle, Christian circles, was trying to lure this Swedish gal, Vicky is her name, I believe, into the circle of the Bethel Church, Redding, California. And I had others who chastised me for even naming Bethel as a church that I think we need to stay away from because of this kind of activity. So here's another email that I got. Julie says, I was never going to be caught dead in a church, so I'm truly amazed what God has done in my life. I am blessed as a new Christian to have been brought to a church that really teaches the Bible. Well, I'm happy too. At my first visit, they were going through Matthew line by line over 98 weeks, a great learning experience for me, who had no religious knowledge whatsoever, totally unchurched. We just started Acts and expect to be in Acts until the end of the summer. I love learning about God, but I realize I am a babe when it comes to Christian doctrine. So that was a good report. That was good news because someone is truly being blessed by their church that they are in. Another person writes, I appreciate you being able to help validate my concerns regarding the times we are in. I've been a part of a local church 15 years. I have always trusted the leadership, but lately have had some red flags that have caused me to do further research on my own. Just so you know, I'm in my mid-30s. I have found that my concerns have been shared primarily by people my parents' age or older, not my generation or younger. I have not had any formal schooling on theology or doctrine. The church I go to is Southern Baptist affiliated, but the team of pastors come from many different denominations. Our church is one of the biggest and most rapidly growing in our area with amazingly gifted worship and visual arts. And then the writer says, after the new year, our church's weekly sermons were based on the book they urged the congregation to read and study in small groups called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this book or author, and by the way, I'm not. My husband and I were urged to also purchase the devotional and workbooks to go along with it. Once we started, I became concerned with the terms contemplative prayer, contemplative spirituality, centering prayer. I started researching these more. I read in the back of the devotional book that the author recommends for anyone wanting more information on centering prayer to visit a certain website. I became very concerned when I started reading the information on the website. I watched the videos. It is very spiritual, but I did not find it to be glorifying of our one true God. That's just some of the response that I had from the program that we did 2 weeks ago, where we considered the various dilemmas that are found in the church today. And so many who want to find a spiritually sound church, and it's very, very difficult. Thankfully, there are some out there, but many have given up. Many are simply getting their church experience either online, on television, on radio, etc. So we've covered a lot of ground this hour. I hope you better understand how Islam fits into the end-time scenario in the Bible. And in this closing segment, I've tried to encourage you to take a stand for truth, even if it costs you, as it did some of those who wrote to me. Many are taking that stand. If we are in the days of the great falling away, the great apostasy, you will be challenged daily to defend the truth of the Bible. I want to thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
We are a moment, you are forever, Lord of the ages, God before time. We are a vapor, you are eternal.
Thank you for joining us for today's Understanding the Times Radio with Jan Markell. We continue to reach the world by reporting current events from a biblical perspective. Costing us thousands of dollars, this listener-supported program is delivered each weekend nationwide and into your home. You can help us produce and distribute this broadcast. We invite you to partner with this ministry. With our ever-changing world, men and women of faith need to be aware of current events as reported and discussed through the lens of Scripture. With a blessed hope in view, each week Jan Markell brings you compelling guest interviews to highlight the dangers in today's world. To become our broadcast partner, please write with your tax-deductible gifts to Olive Tree Ministries, Post Office Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota, 55311. You can also help underwrite this program safely and securely at olivetreeviews.org, or when you phone 763-559-4444. We're looking forward to hearing from you this week, and please continue to pray for the Olive Tree Ministries team. For daily global updates with a biblical worldview, 24 hours a day, log on to olivetreeviews.org.